Welcome to the Directing Animation Livecast with Scott Weiser. Just 1 week before episode 23, when I unleashed 10 feature film pitches into the world, I partnered with Spacestation Animation as a director on exciting original projects. This will open up even more opportunities on this show to explore the art of directing animation and the pursuit of telling deeply meaningful stories. Speaking of Space Station Animation, today I have with me Nathan Riddle, my partner in crime. He is the producer at Space Station Animation, and I am the director as of a month ago. So it's wonderful. We actually have a in-person interview, so that's going to be great. And just a little bit about Nathan. He's always wanted to start an animation studio, and he was going through layoffs at a company he's been at for 16 years, which is pretty legendary in the animation industry. That's a long time. And you know, he's searching spiritually, and he just had this strong feeling he was going to start an animation studio, and he hardly had to try when he got a call from Sean Duras. Sean Duras is a YouTube influencer. He's got a massive audience, and he's just an amazing person to work with. And we're taking a lot of his videos and shortening them and making them into an animated series. And so let's talk about, just to start out, and this may go wild, you know, who knows how this is going to be, but what was your feeling when, you know, you'd been on there a week? His first day, he gives this big presentation to the whole company about the future of the animation studio. It's his first day. And then a week later, all of a sudden they bring in this other guy who's going to be the partner in running the animation studio. What was that experience like?
Well, the whole experience of just getting started, because it was just the first day, the first week of here, let's start an animation studio. And I really didn't know what to expect or where it was going. I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to accomplish prior to this, and Sean was giving me the opportunity to jump in. And it was interesting because a day or two before you came into the office for an interview.
Oh, this is something I didn't know about.
Yeah, well, I was actually searching the internet looking for some different things, and actually stumbled across your podcast.
Oh yeah,
and was watched one of your podcasts where you were interviewing somebody.
It was the Jeff Bell Tangent Animation.
That's right.
I think
that's right.
So I did know about this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I'd watched that, and I'm like, oh, Scott Weiser directing animation. Oh, that's cool. And didn't think anything of it. Continued searching around, and then the next day, Jordan and Sean were talking to me, and they're like, oh yeah, we've been talking to Scott Weiser, and I'm like, why does that sound familiar to me? And then they brought you in for the interview.
Yeah.
And at first, when they first brought me on, they're like, here, start an animation studio. And I'm like, okay, this is a lot going on.
Yeah.
Well, what are all the pieces we need in place? And so when they brought you on, and you're obviously wanting to be a director, mm-hmm. and to direct things. And so we had a great conversation about where our roles would find, and really it fit right in with where I wanted to be, more on the producer side, building a studio, doing the kind of the technical stuff, the producing stuff, and letting you jump in and be able to direct the art, direct the animation, and have a creative vision for everything. Really, particularly the day after, I after pondering about everything, woke up and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a perfect combination. You know what I mean? Because as you're putting pieces together, you need people that have great strengths mm-hmm. in all the different areas of production. And one person just can't do it all. And that's something that I've learned over the years. I've tried to do everything myself and learned that I can't, that I need people that I trust, people that are able to work well with me, you know, have a good attitude. And I think we hit it off really well that first day.
Yeah, I was so surprised. Yeah. And Sean Duras and Jordan were really worried about, you know, we put these two guys in the room together. They have all the strength, you know, so who's gonna, you know, are they gonna battle it out? Like, what's gonna happen? And we just instantly just shifted into our roles, and it was just remarkable. I didn't imagine it would happen that quickly and that painlessly.
Yeah, no, it was actually pretty amazing. And I had been there a week.
Yeah.
And so things were still so new anyway, and everything was still fluid. And I was still trying to figure out, well, what does Sean Duras want? What, you know, how is this really going to work? What is the project really? What are these stories that we're telling? So I was just still in exploration mode. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, to be able to have a partner come on that has your skill set, was such a burden off my shoulder. You know, that first week I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be humongous.
Yeah. How am I going to organize this and critique the animation
and do everything
and build this other thing and do that?
and so it was a little bit overwhelming at first. And so, you know, obviously when they first brought you in and they're like, oh, by the way, we're going to bring in this guy. My initial first thought was, what are we doing?
Sure, yeah, whatever.
I was still just trying to figure it out. But being just a week in, to be able to meet you and to be able to have somebody that I gelled with really well, and again, you know, the background, you know, and already knowing some of your background ahead of time, I'm like, okay, I think we can do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and you made me cry.
Oh,
almost close.
He got a tear right there, but it didn't fall.
Yeah, it didn't. But I've worked so hard, and this has been such an interesting journey. To, you know, into animation was an interesting journey. Out of animation into directing, and then back into animation, and then more directing. Like, all of this stuff has been so up and down, and been trying to get my own feature films off the ground for several years, and to have a directing opportunity that I'm doing original content. That I'm not just doing something that's derivative of something else. Although this is technically derivative, but we're doing it with the family who created it, so it's really great. And it's, you know, you said, I've had a feeling last night, just this inspiration, I'm gonna unleash Scott. And I remember just like, holy cow, who says that? Yeah, who says I'm gonna shelve my agenda, you know, to help somebody else? And that was really a remarkable moment.
Well, and that was within a couple of days after they first brought you on, and I was just spending a lot of time, you know, really pondering about, okay, how is this relationship going to work? What are the roles? What are the, you know, how does everything fit? And, you know, and starting something new like we're doing, you know, everything was on the table. How does everything work? And just, you know, reviewing your stuff and looking at your skill set, looking at my skill set, where I wanted to go and different things. And I did. I had this, it was like a voice in the back of my head that says, you need to unleash Scott. And I'm like, at first I'm like, well, what does that mean? You know,
I'm still trying to figure out what it means.
but I think it had to do with this relationship, right? That it wasn't about, you know, oh, we're going to arm wrestle over who gets to do what, or, you know, again, you know, I've got my own passion projects and things that I would like to see done. Sean Doris has, you know, here's what we're working on. You know, you've obviously got your 10 pitches, and so you're doing amazing stuff. And so for me, I think it was a voice to say, you're there to ensure that these things get made, and to really be a servant to the rest of the team, and particularly you, as you lead the direction and the director side of Spacestation Animation.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the feeling that I got, that, you know, kind of the, you know, to kind of really solidify that relationship of how we'd be working together.
Yeah. That's really cool. That's really cool. So let's talk about this production. We now that it's been revealed on it was on Sean Doris's channel, right? That they had the family. They showed some of the animation, so we even know what the first episode is going to be like. Right. Several clips have been shown. Let's talk about like what happened before us at Space Station and how that was to start to wrangle this into things so we actually hit a deadline. And then we'll talk about episode 2 after that, right? Like what we're learning about the transition from episode 1 to episode 2. And
well, when I came on, there was a team of some modelers, an animator, and a few people there that have been working on making this transition of taking these videos for Adley and be able to transition them into 3D content. What would it look like if what they were playing in the videos was what was in their heads while they were imagining it, right? So if we're at Pirate Island, what does Pirate Sean look like? What does Fairy Adley look like? And so they'd done a lot of work in building characters, building some environments, and doing a lot of things. But it really was the blind leading the blind a little bit, you know, because Sean Doris, he's like, I want an animation studio.
I'm going to start an animation studio, but he knew nothing about it.
But he didn't. So. And so there were, you know, so he knew, oh, I need these types of artists. I need these types of things to be able to create these things. So he started assembling in a team. And the thing that amazes me is the quality of the talent that he was able to acquire.
Yeah,
because,
that's true.
Because for such a small team, the concept art, the storyboards, the models, the animation that had been done,
Yeah.
really was coming along nicely. It was just that it was more like herding cats. Right?
Yeah, it was more like how do we take all this amazingness and filter it into a deadline?
Right.
Yeah.
And actually get it done. So they'd been working on it for 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
And then when Sean called me and he says, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody that can do this," and I'm like, "I've been wanting to do that," and so here we are.
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, deadline for episode 1 is next month," and animation I think there was 1.5 sequences that were done out of 9.
And in Blender.
And
so we were switching to Maya at that point. Yeah.
Trying to get, because you get more animation opportunities with different animators if you're in Maya. And just working out that pipeline. And so it was just jumping in with both feet into a pool of cold water. It was just like, here we go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I spent the first several weeks just trying to get a grasp on everything, trying to get everybody organized and mostly just on paper, right? Just, okay, you do this, and just trying to, so that everybody had somebody to report to and making sure that we were, hitting marks along the way. And that was a lot of work. And so when you jumped in to be able to sit, make sure that the animations were being critiqued properly, that the designs were being looked at, the art direction and everything, just made it so much easier for me when I was trying to get episode 1. And we hit the deadline. Have you ever watched that Star Wars, I believe it was episode 1, where Anakin Skywalker's in the pod race?
Yeah.
And he just like
and the things
and like it falls apart and he just rolls across the finish line, right? Just the other, it just, that's the way I felt just coming into episode 1. It'd be like, we're gonna get there,
and we hit the deadline.
Parts are falling apart as we go, but it's getting there.
And then we were like, episode 2. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's some things that needed to be fixed.
And another reason for that is that you had this big idea, like it's going to take at least 14 days to render this first episode. 7 minutes. That's a lot of time of just like buffer of like, we finished the animation, now we can release it like 2 weeks later still. And so you had this decision. They were wanting to shift to Unreal Engine, which would render in real time.
Right.
And they wanted to do it maybe by the end of the year or the beginning of the year. And you're like, no, let's do it episode 3. No, let's do it episode 2.
Well, I could just see that, because particularly with YouTube animation, the key is speed, because we need to get episodes out fast.
Yeah.
And so we just don't have the time or the luxury to wait for rendering.
Right.
And so, and the rendering that's coming out of episode 1 is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
But it's hard. There's just a lot of little steps. And so with my experience, I've got, 16 years in both cinema and games. I'm like, let's use game technology to speed this up. Mm-hmm. Let's jump into Unreal. Because then while the animation is going on, we can export layout and start laying out a sequence and start the edit right away.
Yeah.
We can start, and then as the animation finishes up, we just export that in. We're able to be able to create all what's usually post-production concurrently with production.
Yeah.
And that speeds things up so that we're able to get content out a lot faster. Now we're at the beginning of that pipeline. We've still got a lot of development to go, but we're on a good track.
We also had a situation where the family loved the designs of the characters, but then we're like, Jenny's model, could we maybe make Jenny's model a little better? And we start opening this up and making the model better and amping up the appeal. And Jenny's like, yeah, that looks really nice. What about Sean? And so we go into Sean, and now he's got little Flynn Rider vibes going on. We adjust all these things with Sean, and then we had our animation celebration meeting, and Jenny's like, Adley's face looks so flat in the first episode. Can we improve her face? I was like, we'll do that, right? So we had all these meetings where we're just sitting there with the modeler, and we're really making a lot of these tweaks to make it better. That means all the characters have to be re-rigged, which is needed to happen anyway because of the Unreal Engine. And what have you thought about that entire process? It has delayed things. Oh, and then we had this, I mean, just full transparency. We had this doctor's office that when Adley finally saw it, she's like, what is that? It looked like a playroom, but not like an oversized playroom, but not a doctor's office. And it's like, we need to change this. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we've done a full massive redesign on that thing.
Yeah. So
Which all these things have cost, we have animators kind of sitting around where they're eating up money and that sort of thing. We're keeping them busy, kind of improving episode 1 and doing little things, to in that zone. But how's that process been?
well, at the end of episode 1, there were definitely some questions about, some of the levels of quality, things that we learned through the episode of being like, oh, this isn't working from a rigging standpoint. This isn't looking good when it's rendered. This, it's okay, but it could be better, right?
Yeah.
And so the first question was, can we make these little tweaks? Oh yeah, we've got a week right here between episodes. We can make those, and then now several weeks in, making all the changes. But I think they're changes for the better because they're making us better, right? The quality of our production is going to be better. It's going to communicate better to the audience. And so it was worth taking the time right now at the end of episode 1 to make those changes so that we're not 5 or 6 episodes in and saying, oh,
yeah,
do we change it now because now it's established, right?
Yeah.
And so making those types of changes right now was actually really good. And also, even though the animators are kind of biting at the bit to get on to episode 2,
we want to start
the next one, but it's actually been really good because
it's a fun episode.
It's gonna be awesome. But it's actually given you a lot of opportunity to work with the animators. Say, okay, we've gone through the fire together in episode 1. What have we thought about style? What have we thought about, how we're working together? Yeah. And so you've worked with the animators.
Oh yeah, and you bring up an excellent point. And you said that I came in and I started critiquing the animation properly. So we'll pull back a little bit, be a bit more transparent, and talk about my mistake and then how we handled that, which I think was great. So what happened there is I came in and I looked at all these animators and I thought, okay, we've got this style here, and this style here. I thought, how can I start marrying these styles together? So I was assigned 3 shots that I started trying to bring all those styles into one. And then I created tutorials on that. And I said, okay, here's how I'd like you to try animating, right? That was kind of a mistake because everybody has their own workflow, and it caused some of the animators to really struggle a lot. And then they kind of, you came to me one day and you was like, you had a hard time telling me about it, but you're like, it's not extremely negative, but there is a negative pushback where people are like, does Scott think I have to animate like him?
Right.
And the thing I didn't communicate was like, I was just trying to bring them all together. I was trying to see what was strong about Miles, Curtis, and Anthony and bring that all together, right? And so in our conversation, it was a great idea that came up that was like, how about we create a cut of the best of the animation of episode 1 and bring everybody in the room and we'll talk about it. And then that will be a training video for future animators. And we did that yesterday. And
right.
They really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
They really enjoyed the process. And they felt like they were owning the style,
right? Which
is really what it's all about. Like director, producer, but you have a team of human beings who need to feel like they have ownership in this thing.
Absolutely. So, well, and I think that's one of the cool things, particularly with this project, and you being a director of animation, is because they're small little episodes.
Yeah,
there's great opportunity to learn how to be a director. Right. You've done a lot of directing in a lot of different capacities, but not necessarily in a series, right?
Yeah. And I built the teams too.
Right.
Yeah. So this is coming in on a team that's 8 months old.
Right.
And everybody, like, there's one person who thought I was coming in to take their job.
Right.
There were other people who were like, who is this guy? And what are you doing? You're going to direct us? We've never had a director. Sean Duras was the director. But something he said to me is like, I just don't, on everything else, he's felt like he could really communicate clearly and achieve the vision. But with animation, because it takes so much technical skill to learn, he's just, he's felt overwhelmed. And that's why he hired you and I.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's right. And so, yeah, so it's first off, it's been fantastic. I've learned a ton.
Yeah.
I know you've talked about how much you've learned. And I think that's just making us stronger, right? Because episode 2, we've taken some time to sharpen the saw to make sure that we're on task. I think you and I have a little more ownership over episode 2 because episode 1 was already in the pipe. It was already built. The design was already there. It's just like jump in and wait. Did we hit the schedule?
And oh man, I can't wait for you to see episode 1 because if you have an animation eye, you will see the quality go like this, like from beginning to end. That's how the quality goes. It gets better and better and better as the time goes on.
Yeah.
And there's some shots that came out at the end that it was just kind of blew our minds. We're like, how'd you do that quickly?
Right.
And,
particularly with the speed and the style that we were doing, which is, very cartoony, very quick, very snappy. And the amount of time these guys were just cranking stuff out. I'm really amazed that in 1 month we got that episode animated.
It was amazing. And the other thing was when certain people came on, the quality benchmark was Coco Melon. But then we're like, well, look at that animator's doing. Like, can't we do more stuff like that? He's doing it fast, And we're also having him create tutorials for the team. So just so everybody knows how everybody else is working. One of the reasons we're doing it this way is because we all work remotely, mostly. Because during COVID, Space Station had to go remote. And we still work in person sometimes now that COVID is less of a strain in Utah. But it's still mostly remote. Yeah,
we got people all over the country from New York to Texas to where else back east is McKay. But we're everywhere, and then strewn all over Utah. We really are everywhere. And those that are local, we try to get together at least once a week or every couple of weeks to be able to have that in-person connection, because I think there is a lot of synergy that happens when we're together versus headphones. I think there is something kind of powerful there. So
there is, and we actually technically don't have a space station. That's kind of funny. It's constantly expanding. It's like space, and so we have an area where we know we're going to be, but there's another group in that area, and they're purchasing up this strip mall, like one unit at a time, and then knocking holes in it and putting a space portal in. It's an amazing workplace. Really cool. There's an adult-sized slide, electric bikes. There's a secret room with all these cool treats that a space station is invested in, and
someday we should do a tour.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. If
we should have done that. Well, maybe because in 2 episodes from now, it's going to be Honduras.
Oh, so
maybe we just have it pre-recorded and play it.
That'd be rad.
Yeah,
you guys want to see the space station?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of the most amazing things about it, though, is the people. The happiness at this company is just so healthy. Yeah. I've been there a month, and I barely started to see where the grievances are, like where people have issues. But these issues are I can deal with it, because all this other good stuff is going on, and I'm figuring it out as I go. And so, it's a rare type of place.
Oh yeah. Well, and especially with Honduras, because he inspires me so much.
Yeah.
I don't know how he has time to do everything that he does, but he just comes in so excited.
Yeah.
He's just always got great ideas and such great vision.
Mm-hmm.
And it's inspired me to push what I do.
Yeah.
And really, again, like I said in the beginning, I feel like I'm kind of a steward, a helper, a servant of this project, and he's inspired me so much that I just feel that I'm just like, whatever you need, Sean, I'm here to make your project a reality, because I see how much passion he has, and I want to add that same level of passion
and have it rub off too.
Yeah.
Like I watched the videos of how he plays with Adley and A for Adley, and I'm like, oh, I could be a better dad, couldn't I? Right. I could play more with my kids, couldn't I? And no, I wasn't doing too terribly, but just watching it, and I know it happens in front of an audience, and it's planned and all that stuff, but it's still very inspiring.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. We're part of something really cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of what is sometimes termed as cringy content on YouTube for kids. And, he's always has an emphasis on a really good message. He realizes that there are a lot of fatherless children out there who watch his show, and he's kind of the father figure for them. So he takes a lot of that responsibility upon himself. And it's great to have that kind of content to then take this 24-minute episode and crunch it down into a 7-minute episode and still maintain that essence of people are still going to kind of realize this is a daughter playing with her father.
Right. Right.
And
absolutely.
And her mother and her brother.
Absolutely.
And stuff,
And it's really just so fun to be, like you say, to be a part of that culture and to be able to be a part of sharing that message. Because I know Honduras, he's mentioned that several times. He just wants to make a positive difference in the world.
Yeah.
And I want to make a positive difference in the world, and you want to make a positive difference in the world.
Definitely.
And we're here someplace where we can make a positive difference. And I think that's, for me, the difference between me going out and starting my own studio and trying to struggle to do whatever, and just jumping into some place that's already doing that, and enabling me to do that out of the gate, enabling you to do that out of the gate.
Well, it's not going to just be A for Adley either.
Right.
Like with somebody like Honduras, he's like, I've got all these ideas. drops these root beer bombs on us every day, which a root beer bomb, just so you know, is a bomb that when it explodes, giggles come out of it. So he has another one to share with us that I was just telling Nathan about. Who knows what it is? I have no idea. He's like, I've got a root beer bomb, but I've got this meeting. So I've got to go to this meeting. Okay. Can't wait to hear it.
I know there's so much good stuff going on, and I'm excited for what the future holds. Yeah. And everybody asks, "Oh, how's your new job?" And I'm like, I couldn't have asked for anything better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because of that, because of the root beer bombs, because of the opportunities that lie before us, and the vision that lies before us.
Well, we've also discussed, you have shows on Netflix that get, maybe half the views of one of the episodes of A for Adley, And it's like, my goodness, they put so much work and money into this thing, and you're not getting a ton of views. And I know that the subscription pays for that, but I think as a creator, you want your work to be seen. Yeah. And I do think that creators like Sean Duras really have kind of their finger or their pulse on what the future of distribution is. Yeah. I think the distribution model of entertainment is a little broken right now, and we're trying to figure it out. And with this artist-run economy, it's becoming even more so a question, like, how are we actually going to move forward in this? Right. And being at a place like Space Station has really opened my mind. And this Livecast, I've had several different interviews that now I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Right. And we talked about how one of my feature films nearly funded, like a week after I released that episode, that 10 feature film pitch episode. And it didn't quite work out, but that doesn't mean the project's dead. Like, it's very much alive. And like having all these directing experiences has just been amazing. And having a partner like you who's willing to tell me kind of something that's hard to tell somebody, like, here's a blind spot, Scott. We need to be better, Well, and you did it so well too. Well, and it wasn't even a lecture type of thing.
And I hope
this is just what I've seen.
That's and that's where I guess where our personalities jive is I really look at things from being friends first. Yeah. And it all comes from a place of really caring. Yeah. And I think that's what happens at the space station is people really care about each other. Yeah. And that's why it jives. And that's one thing that I've taken. That's one thing I've always tried to do is be like, okay, paperwork aside, I can't let the paperwork or the pipeline or the deadline be more important than the people. Yeah. Right. It's, if there's something to talk about, we need to talk about it, but we need to do it with love and kindness and to empower each other. Right. It's about empowerment, because the more empowered everybody is, the better work they're going to produce. Yeah. And the less I have to do.
Nice. Well, and then they have ownership over it. Like,
absolutely.
We're all building this studio. Everybody from, I was going to say the least of the team, but I'm trying to think of who would be the least of the team.
That's like least of the team.
Everybody's really, if there's a lack of experience and skill, they make up for it with their enthusiasm for getting in and just making things happen and figuring it out. That, that's kind of crucial. Sometimes you get people who are like, this is the way I've always done it, and I'm only going to do it this way. Right. We don't have anybody like that on the team, which is remarkable. Yeah,
it's amazing. It goes back to what I said before. I don't know how Sean was able to pull this team together.
We kind of know how. So, Space Station is just a remarkable place. Yeah. If they make a post on LinkedIn saying, we're looking for this kind of a person, they get all these comments. Like, everybody kind of wants to be part of what the Space Station is doing, because there's just such an amazing energy there.
Well, and Sean's also got a really, he's got a dial on people's, because really most of the people on our team aren't terribly experienced. Yeah. Right. They're just so talented and hungry.
Yeah. Talented and hungry.
And Sean Doris was able to recognize that over somebody who maybe, like you say, had a lot of experience, but was stuck in their groove.
Oh, right? Yeah. Well, they even talked about, they were like looking for somebody who's like Pixar, this director from Pixar, or this director from Disney. And we're glad we found you guys.
I know. Here's a couple of noobs.
Well, not even noobs. Like, we've been working for years to get this stuff going, and it just, the right opportunity hasn't opened up. But I always think of who composed The Nutcracker? Tchaikovsky. Yeah. So if you look at the documentary behind Tchaikovsky, an interesting thing about him, and I kept thinking about this throughout my career, I keep meeting these really big obstacles, and they're really tough. And I was on the Bancroft Brothers podcast last night, and one thing I was glad he said, he's like, "Nothing stops you, Scott." I was like, cool. I'm glad like that's becoming my brand.
Right.
Because I had to keep reminding myself, well, Tchaikovsky, when he was a little boy, his nanny locked the piano because he was playing the piano all the time. And then he would wake up in the middle of the night when he couldn't play the piano as much. And he'd be like, the music's stuck in my head. And he was frustrated. And so they thought, this is a problem. We need to shut off the music. And so for years, Tchaikovsky wasn't able to touch the music.
Interesting.
He was like blocked from it, right? And he becomes a lawyer or something. I can't remember exactly what the career was, but he's on this boat and meets this composer. And he's like, oh, like, how do you do what you do? And he asks him, and he's like, the composer's like, well, you have to be able to take one thing and write hundreds of variations, or maybe it was like 20 variations or something. So he spends all night writing 30 variations. And they were amazing variations. Right. And it's just like, this guy was held back from doing what he wanted to do for so long that when he got the opportunity, he was so hungry, and I think that is a big component for creating something like what we're trying to create, which is pretty groundbreaking.
I totally agree. Yeah. We're jumping in with both feet. We're looking at, new emerging technology that's just making stuff so much easier to create. And we're creating it for an audience that, like you'd mentioned earlier about, there's so much cringy content out there. We're trying to create content that fills a need for these young kids that parents can look at and be like, okay, I can feel comfortable with my kids watching this because it's got a good message. It's fun. It doesn't have any weirdness in it that I have to worry about, and so yeah, we're just pushing the bounds, guys. We're just
pushing the boundaries, definitely. So let's talk about, I know you gave a speech on your first day of Space Station. How has that changed? Where do you see the future of Space Station animation?
So yeah, my first, that's a story in itself. When you start someplace and Sean's like, we're having a big get together of all the heads of all the companies under the Sean Doris brand.
8 currently.
And everybody go in a room and write down what your plan is for the future. And I'm like, first day, what? I'm still wrapping my head around getting the forms filled out. And so I go in there and I'm like, well, what? And it was fairly high level. It
was,
but it was about just purely bringing joy to viewers and providing content that matters. Mm-hmm. And as far as that goes, I don't think my vision's changed. As far as, now what that looks like has changed as we've talked with Sean Doris and the other team members of what can this A for Adley cartoon look like? What do all the little spin-offs related to it look like? What are other IPs? And I think it's taken what my very first day, my presentation of, hey, I want to make content that matters. And now I'm seeing the content that matters starting to formulate. And that's super exciting for me to be able to say, okay, where my heart wanted to lead me, I can already see the steps taking us there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if the word empowering is awesome, but to be able to see that and to have Sean Doris have so much faith in us to be able to make that happen, I just get so excited to go to work every day. Yeah, because we're at the beginning. We're still trying to finish rendering episode 1. There's still some roads and roads to go, but the path is clear. We know where we're going, mm-hmm. and we know the difference we're going to make. Yeah. And so I don't know if that completely answered your question. Maybe it walked around in a circle, but I think that having content that matters, that makes a difference and makes a positive impact in the world, without being preachy, without being, you can start right where you are, just being a better dad, a better mom, a better sibling. Right.
I commented to Sean pretty early on that I was glad that there wasn't like a lot of political spin and like all this stuff that you see in a lot of companies nowadays. And he's like, yep, we don't share opinions, just positivity. Yep. That was the direct quote. And I was like, I want to work with this guy. Yeah. I think that was like 2 or 3 days in. Right. Yeah. And it was awesome. So Man, we've covered so much ground.
There's a lot.
Is there anything you want to talk about? Like you just covered it so quickly. I usually have like more material planned.
Well, there's a thing.
I do have one more question for you, but that's the Get Wires moment, and that happens in 5 minutes. So
5 minutes. All right.
So,
do
you have any questions for me?
Well, we've chatted quite a bit.
Yeah, we had this long conversation before this.
Yeah,
just of different things that.
Yeah.
That strategies we're planning.
At what point did you know you wanted to be a director versus just being an animator?
So that's a good question. I don't know if my audience knows this. I maybe have kind of mentioned it, but I grew up wanting to write Broadway musicals, make movies, write books, like make video games. Like I had all these ideas, and I would run around the basement, like hopping along the furniture. And my mom was like, "Does my kid have autism?" Which who knows? Maybe I'm a bit on the spectrum, but I'm sure we're all somewhere on there, right?
Yeah.
But and I was making sound effects and all this stuff. I had a couple cartoon series in my head
that you were just acting in.
Yeah, one was called Rainbow Rose. So there was a female protagonist. You'll notice this in all my work. There's kind of a crossover between male and female protagonists.
Right.
And there was one called Power of the World. He was a male protagonist. And I needed those two different series to kind of explore femininity in life and masculinity in life, right? And I guess maybe that's what I was trying to do, sort out, like, here's mom and here's dad. I don't know.
Right.
But then sometimes they would meet too. Like sometimes, you know how you have in some series, you'll have crossovers?
Oh, yeah.
Like Supergirl will go talk to the Speed or whatever. And that would happen too sometimes. Like the stories would cross over, but I kept them very, very separate. And then I was always directing my neighborhood kids to do plays. So I would come up with this play, or that's how my play, like how I would play. So I would be like, okay, here's the bridge and we're crossing the lava. And and then you have this emotional moment where you remember when your dad died in the lava. and you bend it. Like I was even directing like their movements. And my cousin says there was one point that they were just playing, her and her friend, and I came up to them and I was like, I just turned you into a lizard and you're not crawling. Like
you turned you into a lizard and you're not crawling. Why aren't you? Oh, that's funny.
Come on, don't get with the program. You're part of the play. You know. And so growing up I was always, and the only place I knew to outlet this was theater.
Right.
And the cool thing is I did a lot of choreography in theater because I wanted to be part of every component.
Right.
So I'm like, when I was planning the dance moves and where people moved, I had a camera in my mind moving through the stage, even though the stage was like just staying put. And so just for years, I didn't even know what animation was. It wasn't until high school that my commercial art teacher had this, because I loved to draw and to do theater.
Right.
But I thought I would do theater because I thought that was the outlet. Right. And he had this magazine that had For the Birds on it, talking about the new technology. It might have been CG Magazine, CG World or something. Okay. And then he's like, I have this piece of software. I can't even remember what it was called. It might have been the oldest version of Cinema 4D or something. Right? But he's like, here's this book. It's this thick. He's like, maybe you can figure out how to use the program. And I went home and read that whole book.
Wow. And
I created a little animation of a rocket kind of going out and grabbing this. No, it was a light bulb jumps out of a thing and then pulls out a rocket and flies out the window. And but I still thought I was going to do musical theater. I was a musical theater in college and that sort of thing, and musical theater major. And then my dad said one day you'd be good at that Pixar stuff. And the more I looked at it, the more I loved it. But I did always picture myself as a director, like always.
Right.
And then I was told, no, you have to find one of the jobs and get in the trenches and work in the trenches. Then you work your way up. And I was even told at one point, like, don't tell anybody you want to be a director.
Really?
Because people will roll their eyes at you because they're like, generally people think you'll never make it, or you don't have the tenacity, or you don't really know what you're asking for.
Right.
And actually, I have started to think that with some people because I know the journey I've been on. I'm like, do you really want that much pain? Or do you actually just want to be an animator? Because, they're different pros and cons of each job within the animation.
Absolutely.
But doing it, I do think this is the right zone for me.
Yeah.
It feels really great. And, I get to animate and draw every once in a while, but I do love taking an artist and helping them push themselves further without realizing they're being pushed too much, Yeah. Maybe a little bit of pain, but not too much. So, yeah.
Right on. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So my question for you, this is the last Get Wiser moment segment we always do.
Okay.
The question is, if my goal is to get the highest concentration of truth into a story, what approach do you think is the best?
That's deep. If you want to get the
Tough question.
highest concentration of truth in a story.
Yeah.
Gosh, for me, I think it's just not overthinking it.
That's interesting.
I think that as we tell stories, they're already to some extent coming from a place of truth, even if it's just fantastic and it's full of lies and it's whatever. It's still coming from something that we internally need, right? And so part of my journey is similar to yours is coming up through theater and doing a lot of acting and whatnot. And there were those that were just so concerned about every moment being truthful.
Yeah.
That they just overthought everything to the point that it wasn't truthful anymore because it was overthought. Where my style was a little bit more evolutionary as the scene evolved, and I started being like, oh, well, you said that way. Is that because I'm mad at you or not mad at you or whatever? And then I realized, oh, I can affect how you say that by how I say something. And so then I just tried to organically let the truth kind of find itself. And so
your answer is so much different than everybody else's.
Yeah, and so I've got a lot of different answers than most people, but I think truth already exists within every story and within every person, right? And it's just a matter of, for me, just letting that truth organically find itself, and then you'll discover, oh, look at that, there was something there. And people have come up to me when when I've told a story or done a performance, and oh man, that was so deep, how did you get there? And I'm like, well, I just flowed with it.
Went there.
I just went with it.
Okay, you've opened a can of worms. I don't usually interject my opinion into this. Sometimes I do, just a little bit here and there, but the only place, I agree with everything you said, except for one little place. I think one thing that we're getting wrong nowadays is we think the truth resides in a single person. So it's like your truth,
sure,
my truth, that person's truth, right? I've begun to think of truth more as we have 6 to 7 billion people on this earth. Maybe it's 8. What number is it? It's huge.
Yeah, it's
billions of people on this earth. And there is actually a common place where the experience of every single one of those people overlaps. I believe and they call it maybe the collective unconscious, or they call it, this, but that's, I think, where it overlaps. And I do think that if you try too hard to get there, and this is what I like about what you're saying, is that if you think too hard to get there, you're like, well, does it match this political ideology I have, or this religious belief I have, or this other thing I have? And maybe your religious belief, or maybe you're onto something with those things. Maybe there's some goodness in those things that you believe. But by just focusing just on those things and trying really hard to overthink that area, you might miss the opportunity to tap into the collective unconscious.
Right.
To say, like, I listened to a psychologist one time who talked about a famous writer, and he's like, he had the perfect writing style because this is what he did. He took what he thinks is the ideal.
Right.
And then he created somebody exactly the opposite and horrible and made them just as strong. Like this hero and this villain, like this villain was even stronger than the hero in the beginning, right? And then this is the opportunity for the hero to grow by interacting, but he would let the truth emerge from that.
Right.
That was the approach. And I just love that.
Yeah.
I think it's so profound that and the same psychologist said that, great artists don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
As they create it.
Right.
But they do, I think what they do know is how to get their ego out of it and how to let it flow and how to let it emerge.
Right.
From
Well,
the
and
process.
I think we're talking about the same thing here.
Yeah, we are. Absolutely.
Where you know, as you overthink truth, I think that's how we're getting so many fragmented ideas, and we're trying to redefine everything. And
most films, even the ones that people will say are kind of deep, I see them and I'm like, this isn't deep.
No, because
this isn't Sunset Boulevard. This isn't It's a Wonderful Life. You know,
right.
Those films like really affect you and really change your life in a way.
Right,
you know?
because they're not trying to change the truth or to preach, hey, I found this great new thing that I overthought and now I'm trying to change. No, they tapped into what you called kind of that universal excuse me,
collective unconscious.
That collective unconsciousness, which I was just calling just truth.
Yeah,
right.
Truth, yeah.
Truth exists. We all know when we see a rock, what a rock is.
Yeah.
Right. But if you start overthinking a rock, now the next thing you know, we're breaking it down to, what do we call this type of a particle? And in the end, it's a rock.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we all understand. And so letting that truth, the things that shared experience, the things that we all know to just come out, that's when you touch people. Because I'm not there to tell you what a rock is.
I'm not there to lecture to you.
Right.
Or to say, I have the right political ideology. I'm going to tell you what that political.
Right. No,
you need to live the way I think you need to live.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just letting, and I guess maybe another term for that is just being honest.
Yeah.
Just letting honesty flow rather than trying to, because everybody thinks nowadays that they're so unfulfilled if they didn't change the world somehow.
Yeah.
And it's like, so everybody's out there trying to prove that they've got a worldview that's better and come listen to me.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well,
yeah,
no.
we want to be the hero, right?
Right.
It's like we want to be the one to be the champion for this cause or this cause. And I think sometimes you actually, in the act of drawing too much attention to yourself, you're actually hurting those that you're trying to protect.
Absolutely.
You know, because it's all about you, right? And I think that's another thing. It's like, again, you have to get out of the way a little bit.
Yep.
You need to let it flow. I just love that answer. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely.
And do you have a certain place you'd like people to follow you, or would you like to just have them follow us on? We do have the Space Station Animation Instagram, but it's not quite working yet.
I don't know that there's much of a post.
I've got a username and a password. That's it.
Oh, we should start posting more.
We should.
Yeah, definitely follow us there.
There is a Space Station Animation YouTube channel. That's the place to follow us. Yeah.
Yep. Find us there.
Yeah.
We start to see all the videos as we start making stuff coming up.
Yeah, I will add that link down in the comments.
Perfect.
Or the show notes.
Perfect.
So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, I hope we all get a little wiser. Thank you for watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser. Audio version edited by Kiera Horowitz. Copyright Scott Weiser LLC 2021.